Doctor, it's time to take your medicine. As a follow-up to our Giving a episode, Angel and Dr. E review two survivor interactions that occurred this week, which were both humbling and instructive. Welcome to Citizens Reunited to Overcome Cancer. We know it as the CROC Podcast, and it starts right now.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here is your host, Dr. E.
Howdy, CROC Nation. Dr. Tommy and Ellie here with you with another CROC podcast, along with my co-host and best pal, Angel Santana. Have faith, let it begin. Angel, how are you, my dear friend?
Coming off the heels of an amazing Rewind episode, Words, holy cow, I hope everybody enjoyed it. Welcome to Citizens Reunited to Overcome Cancer. This, we know it as the CROC Podcast. And E, I missed you, buddy. How you doing?
Everything's great. I've been really enjoying the new look. I hope people are noticing that we're making some changes. We're rebranding as Citizens Reunited to Overcome Cancer, being a little clearer with our wording and with our logos and our naming. And also some of the changes you made for the introduction, Angel. They're beautiful. The board of directors is on fire. It's just been fantastic. And I think that the last podcast we did, which was, when did giving a, go out of style? I think I received more positive feedback on that episode, believe it or not, than in a long time. Was that your experience?
Me too. I mean, to get two text messages from our boards, one from Denise, one from Nick, and they're like, listen, you nailed it. I'm like, yes, we're on the right track.
So that tells me one of two things. Either they have, potty mouths like I do, or we should swear a lot more on the CROC Podcast.
I'll have my sensor ready to go.
But very exciting. We have a lot of cool things coming up. We have next week, we'll be interviewing my friend, Dr. James Malisi, who's a guy I grew up with, went to college with, and was best man at his wedding. We lost touch for quite a while, and he reconnected, and we had him over maybe last weekend with his beautiful wife, and he expressed an interest in starting his own podcast. So we're going to bring him on to talk a little bit about being a neurosurgeon and taking care of our survivor thrivers with brain cancer and metastatic brain metastasis. So that should be very exciting. So a lot of really good things on the horizon.
Absolutely. And, to remind everybody, since we are talking about it, CROC Podcast, Citizens United to Overcome Cancer, is available on every single platform. And I just learned something new the other day, and I think it's great. If you have an Alexa, you can literally go and say, Alexa, play the CROC Podcast, and it will find us.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Angel, as a follow-up to our, when did giving a, go out of style episode, I actually had two interactions this week with survivors that I'd like to share that are loosely related, but more important, they were very humbling experiences and they were very instructive. And I think on the CROC Podcast, I find that a lot of our successful podcasts, and I hope that all of our episodes are successful, but some of the ones that are referred to more often than not are the ones where we sort of peel back the curtain and take a look at some of the foibles, and starting first and foremost with mine. So it's sort of related to that past episode, but different, as my kids would say, same, but different. And I want to say that there are common themes to the two stories that we're going to tell today. One of the themes is spending the time. That means that a lot of times we criticize our caregivers, our doctors, our nurses for not spending the time with the patients, even not spending the time that they feel is necessary, meaning that many times we walk in a room and we're not there, and we're really not there, and we want to get out of there as soon as possible. That's not what I'm talking about. Sometimes we actually think that we're spending the time, but that's in our mind. It may not be the same to our survivor thrivers perspective and their experience of that visit. But the time that the patient needs, the time that the patient thinks is enough. Even if the patient, isn't sort of following the rules and isn't with it, might be, dragging and being tangential and kind of going in circles. That still doesn't give us the right not to listen or to turn them off. The second common theme is, again, we talked about this in the last podcast, managing issues and discontent that are out of our control. So I think in life, we always teach our children and our friends, we tell them, hey, listen, if it's in my control, it'll get done. If it's not in my control, then I don't have control and I can't promise that'll get done. So how to deal with patients that are unhappy when when they fall out of our control into someone else's control. And number three, learning how to take the beating. So a lot of times our patients get very frustrated and they get very discouraged, and they feel like they just have to let it out and they have to scream, I'm mad as hell and I just don't want to take it anymore. Unfortunately, we're the ones that sometimes get the brunt of that. And we're going to talk a little bit about letting the survivors vent. So the first case, just getting right into it, Angel, is a case of a really great guy, actually, a Vietnam vet, amazing sense of humor. I really, really liked him. We had I thought, a great consultation. He came to see me for prostate cancer, but when I was working him up, I found a lung nodule. He was a smoker, so I sent him for a biopsy, and I sent him to a fantastic practitioner. Really, she took really good care of him. But at the end of the day, she did what she could do, and then she needed some more testing. And then he went into that black box. So the doctor actually cared, but the system didn't. So, time passed. The patient came back for that. Remember, we called it the fall through the cracks appointment, where we have patients come back just to make sure that they don't get lost. And when he came back, boy, he gave me the wrath of God. And what I want to focus on is that as much time as I spent with this particular patient, his experience, the vibe that I was throwing off was one of, and we talk about this all the time on the CROC podcast, he felt as if I had one hand on the door from the minute that I walked in. So almost like I was giving off a vibe that like I was so busy that I needed to get out of the room. And we're going to discuss that tonight on this podcast, as far as listening and things like that, and what we are responsible for. The second case was a lot different. This guy was not as likable. He was a very angry guy. He was one of those people who had a chip on their shoulders. Also a prostate cancer patient, but basically was rambling and had flight of ideas and circular thinking, and he just was talking nonstop. And we were having some machine issues on our big linear accelerators. And unfortunately, he was the first case of the day. So for 3 Mondays in a row, the machines were down for whatever reason. And medically, it was not that big of a deal. But imagine to a survivor thriver, when a machine goes down, that's a huge deal. It actually cuts at the heart of our credibility. We need patients to trust us and trust our machinery. We need them to be confident. And basically, he came in and he gave the nurses, the wrath of God, same as in the first case. And then when I went in to address him, he gave it to me as well. And it was really heartbreaking, because what happened was he was so discouraged and frustrated and angry about the machines being down. He made a comment about me, which I really took to heart, especially because, as you'll find out, it had to do with one of my greatest passions. So one of my greatest passions is, of course, get to know our survivor thrivers personally. Number two is, everyone knows that I'm a huge dog freak, that I love dogs. I like every single type, flavor of dog, little dogs, big dogs, everything in between, nude dogs, fuzzy dogs, furry dogs, hairy dogs, you name it, ears up, ears down, tails, no tails, whatever. I'm a big dog guy. So we were talking about dogs. That was one of his passions. And of course, I showed him pictures of my dogs. And then somehow we got in one of his circular thinking, and we never got to look at the picture of his dog. And I didn't think twice about it because I had spent a lot of time in my mind. I thought I spent a lot of time with him. But when he was angry and discouraged about the machines, he brought up that I didn't even have the time to look at his dog, which was almost like a knife in my heart. It really made me stop and think and really wanted to devote this podcast to these two gentlemen who are, again, I'm humbled and I am thankful to be able to share this with everyone. So let's start right in with spending the time. So we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about spending the time, um, managing issues and discontent that are out of our control, and taking the beating. So that's what we're going to start with, spending the time. So this is a crucial subject. It's one of the number one criticisms of doctors that I hear on a day-to-day basis. And that lack of spending time, or the perception of us not spending enough time with our patients, inhibits a closer, more therapeutic relationship, a more successful relationship, and a better healing relationship. So here's common things that we've talked about, Angel, on the podcast. The doc came in for 3 minutes and he was out of there, or she was out of there. He had his hand on the door from the minute he walked in. Again, criticism from patient number one to me, meaning that I did spend the time, but I must not have actually made him feel that he was safe, that I was paying 100% attention to him. Didn't seem he cared to hear what I had to say. Again, the second case, and gave me the bum's rush. That's when I get all the time from my farmers, right? So, hey, you're giving me the bum's rush. You're not spending enough time. And it's one of the subjects that's most discussed on this podcast. And the caveat being, I talk a lot about trash on this podcast. I talk about a lot of the broken systems in our healthcare. I talk about a lot of broken behaviors in our practitioners. And I always say that it is a criticism of all of us, starting with me. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm holier than thou when I make these podcasts or do these podcasts or bring out these shortcomings, or I'm standing on my soapbox, proclaiming what everyone should be doing when I'm doing the exact same thing that they are. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. And as I always say, our survivor thrivers teach me lessons on a daily basis, which means there's enough material to do podcasts for about 1,000,000 years. So we'll be fine on that as far as content goes. And despite me being as true and tuned into the survivor's journey, I mean, I've been doing this for the last 25 years and spending a considerable amount of my energy and my entire, person, my persona. I'm also vulnerable to the same mistakes as anyone else, maybe even more, because of my humanity. So please, I don't want anyone to think that I'm not including myself when we do these confession, topics. Number 4, busyness is not an excuse. So, Angel, did you know Dr. Gonzalez, my partner, before he retired?
No, I never got a chance to meet him.
So what a great guy, what a fantastic doctor, what a hard worker. And now I'm doing the work of my work, and now I'm doing his work until I can find another partner. So as you can attest to, Angel, there's people lining up lining up the halls, waiting to get a piece of me, waiting to grab me. The phone never stops. And in my 35-year practice of open door policy, anytime has been forced to be modified, stipulated, triaged, and delegated, which is not me, but out of necessity. That's kind of the new normal right now until we get another doctor in. Yet, despite these distractions, extra workload, and stress and exhaustion, there is no, and let me repeat that, there is no excuse to not making our survivor thrivers feel as if they are the only thing in the world to me, to us, for that particular amount of time, for the duration of their visit. And this especially holds true, Angel, for difficult patients, angry patients, patients who might be on the spectrum, patients that are clueless, patients with special needs, patients that are unreasonable, patients that act entitled, spoiled, narcissistic. They especially deserve the time because subconsciously, these are the patients that we do not connect with. They are the ones that rub us the wrong way. They are the ones that piss us off. They are the ones that push our psychological buttons. They trigger a projection. We are brought back to a deep, dark Freudian past and bring us to our knees. They might remind us of a friend that we're not friends with, or a parent who was particularly bad to us, or whatever. It just brings us back. Angel, you mentioned some of the things your brothers did to you. This brings you right back to like you were 4 or 5 years old. And simply put, these are the patients that we just don't like. We might love them because they're cancer survivor thrivers, but we may not just like them. So these are the people that we have to especially spend the time and figure out a way to connect, lest we lose that opportunity to create that healing space that we harp on week after week after week after week. And we need to figure it out, Angel. Just figure it out. We need to spend more time, even when we think we have no more time to spare. We need to put in more effort, even when we feel the fumes of exhaustion. And it is this that we signed up for. We did not sign up to be, someone who makes Slurpees at 7-Eleven. No offense, anyone who makes Slurpees, I respect you to death. I love Slurpees, especially the ones that come in the big gulp. But this is not what we signed up for. We signed up specifically, to be leaders, to help our survivor thrivers, to guide them, to give them the time they need, and not what we need. It's not about us, it's about them. Number two, managing issues and discontent out of our control. So even if it isn't our fault, guess what, Angel? It is our fault. And this is from our last episode. We are ultimately responsible for circling back, as I always said, and checking in on our patients. Think of it as our nanny cam. So anyone out there who has a nanny, you better have some cameras around. So this is our way of being a nanny cam for our survivor thrivers, because we have to be their advocates. In the first case, I referred the patient out to a world-class practitioner. But the patient needed more testing, and they went into that black box. I needed to get involved personally instead of delegating it to others. In the second case, when the machine broke, I didn't break it. I didn't go in the middle of the night and put a mouse in there to chew the wires. But I didn't take the responsibility of a true leader, where everything is ultimately the leader's responsibility. I needed to act as if I was Angel Santana and my microwave just blew up, and I needed to call the president of, what was it, Frigidaire, or what was the name of the company? Frigidaire. Yep. Yeah. So, I needed to call back, and that's exactly what I did today, by the way, is I sent an email with one of those, how you can look on the size of your letters, like they could be 12 or 14 or 16.
The font.
So poor Joyce Temko and poor Jess Gerlach got an email with 72. So the 72, we need to talk now about these machines. So here I am, now getting in the driver's seat, which is where I should have been from the beginning. And at the end of the day, Angel, everything is ultimately, and needs to ultimately be in our own control, because we are the leaders and we need to do this for our survivor thrivers. Last but not least, something that I'm not good at, but I'm getting better at, is taking the beating, letting the survivor vent. So you have to take the punch. You have to take the beating. You have to give them the space. You have to give them the time, as long as it's not a dangerous situation. And I think we addressed that a few podcasts ago. Don't argue. Don't contradict. You don't need to defend yourself or others, even if you're right. You don't have to be in the right. The survivor thriver is always in the right, even when they're not in the right. You don't have to be, you don't have to be that guy that has this dour look on the face, meaning you could be silent, but you can be expressionless and not empathetic. Please make eye contact. Control your breathing. Don't get upset. Reassure the patient, the survivor thriver, with your body language. Make some head nods, acknowledge them. Reinforce that you're listening, that you're involved in this conversation, even though it's an uncomfortable conversation in which you're getting a new exit, drilled into your bottom. Um, get it out. Let them get it out. Here's some good, hey, Joe, get it out. Get it off your chest, please. And then take responsibility. Apologize. Ask how you can make it right, and make it right as far as their perspective from their eyes, and then put together a plan, a remediation plan. Because at the end of the day, you will be shocked about how effective you can be as a leader and as a healer when you act like an effective leader. Angel Santana, your thoughts?
Well, first and foremost, I think that I'm gonna take myself out of the co-host and also your friend role and look at it from a different point of view. The first question I would ask you is based on what you've done, and I want to commend you for being so honest and humble yourself to be able to announce something that you believe, is something that you could have, corrected or done better. But the first question that I would think is, were you having, not that it's an excuse, but were you, that you can recall, were you having a bad day? Was it because to me, as your friend, I know that's not you. For you to for the things that you were accused of, and you clearly stated that you didn't realize you were doing it, but that's just not you. So I guess I have to look at it and say, were you having a busy day, a tough day? Was there something else that you think possibly, without giving an excuse, that distracted you?
What I think, that's a great question, by the way, and I gave it a lot of thought, actually. So here's something that only the 64-year-old version of Tom would be able to see, because certainly anything less than 64 years old, I didn't see this. What we fail to realize is that the person that we think we are, the expressions on our face that we can't see, the tones of our voice, the way we perceive things, and the way we think others are perceiving us, have always been, pretty steadfast in my own mind, meaning that if I was there with patient number one, spending the time with him, but he's feeling like I've got one hand on the doorknob, then I would not understand what he was talking about until this new version of me. Because I think that we all don't realize what we're truly projecting. We don't realize what others are really perceiving in us. And people are very perceptive. People know, sort of, like, they may not be able to speak it or define it, but they kind of know what's going through our minds, even though, our minds are not readable theoretically, right? So in this particular case, you take all of the things we talked about, the extra workload, being tired, having, 15 people lining up the door to talk to me or to grab me or to get me to do stuff or sign papers or whatever, the phone calls, the referring physicians, the fires that we put out. And I think that what he sensed was that there was an unrest in me. There was something in my soul that was not in equilibrium. He felt that I was conflicted with being in that room with him and the 8 million other things that I had on my plate to do. And I must have been projecting this angst. And I think that's what he felt, because it was not anything that I did where I mean, when we talk on this podcast, we talk about very heinous and reprehensible behavior from our practitioners, where they literally do have their hand on the door and there is no room for interpretation. They make it very clear what they're thinking. But I will tell you, I've been criticized, by Denise and by others, even my own children and my wife, as I said, about not being there, being there, but not being there, being so exhausted and being so tired, or being so, preoccupied, or have other things on my mind, or multitasking, or, the OCD part of me that, just can't think about anything else until a task is done. I think all of that comes in, and I know that's a lot of personal information, and I apologize. But I really think that, maybe by sharing this, some other practitioners that are feeling that angst, that conflict of, having so much on their plate and wanting to give 100%, to every single person, that lines up to get a piece of you, whether it be a patient or one of your nurses, or whether it be your family member, your wife, your children. There's only so much we got in the tank. And I think that we have to figure out how we can refresh ourselves. And that might be another good podcast. We could talk about spirituality and prayer, and we could talk about ways of refreshing ourselves as caregivers. But I know it was a long-winded answer, but I think that's really important that I got this out, because I think our patients can really feel what's going on within us, even if we're trying our best to hide it. Did
And
that sort of answer your question?
absolutely. And I think that it also, my follow-up to that is that we also have to take into consideration, which you have stressed on this show many times. We don't know also what they're coming in with. In addition to whatever they've been diagnosed with, in addition to all the stuff that's already inside of them, that projects, that sometimes doesn't project out of them. They hold it in so much that when you come in, you just make them, without you even doing something intentionally, wrong, it just flares them up and they have no one else to vent to.
Yeah, and I think again, we are human and we are going to all make mistakes. So I'm very happy to be, the holiday goose, right? The Christmas goose, to be sacrificed to our caregivers. So maybe it will be helpful to them. And I'm really going to make an effort to try, as well, to try to be there, for myself, for better health, mental health and physical health, for my patients, survivor thrivers, for my coworkers, and for my family. I think it's really important that we do that. As far as the second patient goes, that's a little more difficult, because the first guy was likable and funny, and he did 2 tours in Vietnam as a combat vet. I mean, this guy was the guy. This guy was the man, right? Like, I want to hang out. I want to have a beer with this guy. Like, that's how awesome he is. And the fact that I let him down and disappointed him, was very hurtful. And to me, like, it hurt me. And like, it wasn't hurtful. He didn't hurt me. I felt hurt because I didn't perform. The second guy, when he told me about the dog, it broke my heart, because, it was about a dog, and I'm a sucker for a cute puss. But I'll tell you what, that guy would have made Jesus, he would have tested Jesus and Buddha and Mohammed. He would have taken them to school. They would have had to go back and look at some of their own readings to deal with this guy, because this guy was an angry guy. And as it turns out, he was angry the whole way. But again, no excuses, right? That's part of this podcast, is that it's our responsibility. So I should have remembered, maybe wrote a note to myself, because when he went off on these tangents, I forgot about the dog. And wouldn't you know it, that's the one thing he remembered, was like, you didn't even care enough. You showed me your dogs and you didn't even care enough to see my dog. So, again, another instance that really kind of broke my heart. But the second guy, was way more of a challenge than the first guy. Your thoughts about the podcast, just in general?
I think it was good. I think that it just shows that, the human side of you, and how I'm sure many other doctors and caregivers are going to have probably the same situation. I think that there's a lot of them that are feeling what you have felt or went through, but they don't have that outlet. And I think this episode will allow them to understand, hey, it's not just me. There's others that are feeling the same way.
Awesome. Thank you, Angel. I want to just take a minute before we end, just to thank everybody for listening. And I want to encourage you to communicate with us. We're really, now this is going into our fourth or fifth year, maybe fifth season coming up. And I want to let you know that, like, we are really working hard behind the scenes to put a product together, that you guys can use in your journey, and be that Swiss Army knife for your survivorship. We really think that you guys are deserving and worthy of every opportunity and resource that you can have. And we certainly hope that the CROC podcast is one of those resources that you use. I am very grateful for the board of directors that are so now getting their hands dirty and getting into the meat to try to make this podcast as good as it can be, the best it can be. And I'm very grateful to them. And I want to continue to hear their feedback as well. But I want to hear your feedback. I want you guys to tell me what you think about the new introduction. I want you guys to what you guys think about the new branding. I want you guys to think about the direction we're going with the content of the podcast. As you can see, we're relying much less on more technical issues or less interviews with high power slash highly technical information, and we're really getting to the heart of just your survivorship. That's the day-to-day stuff, going into the clinic, getting your treatments, the people that are treating you, the stories that are happening right in front of you. This is the direction that the board is pushing, and I think it's a very, very healthy and good direction for us, because we still have yet to identify what our power base is, what our wheelhouse is, where that sweet spot is on our baseball bat when Francisco Lindor hits that grand slam that puts us into the championship series. That's where I want the CROC podcast to be. So I want to thank everyone and thank the board of directors. And I would like to end this podcast with a brief blessing and prayer for our survivor thrivers. And we end each podcast the same way. On behalf of Angel Santana and the entire board of directors at the CROC podcast, at Citizens Reunited to Overcome Cancer, wish you a long, healthy, happy, and cancer-free life. God bless you. God be with you. Peace.
Hey, Croc Nation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast to your friends. Visit our website, crocvip.com. We would love to hear your feedback.